Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today is another great guest day. As our ongoing subscribers know, often it's just me on this podcast talking about professional relationships. Occasionally, however, I'll be interviewing subject matter experts, authors, speakers, thought leaders, social scientists, people who want to share, who not just want to, but can share their knowledge about how to build professional relationships, how to build relationships, and enlighten us on how they work. Today I have on the program somebody I've known for a better part of a year now, Sia Yasatornrat. I hope I got that right. Yasatornrat. Is that good? Close enough?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Sia is a podcast fanatic. She's a producer. She's a strategist. She has her own shows, but much of what she does is helps people get shows going and use podcasting as a way of gaining exposure, building their business. And I invited her on. I want to talk about podcasting as a way of building relationships and building business. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Frank. And it's so funny. I saw you like stutter on podcast fanatic. Really? You're going to call yourself that? But honestly, for some odd reason, I feel like fanatic is just a little bit more oomfier than cheerleader or, you know, I just love the concept and meaning of podcasting, and I see it applied in so many different ways. So I'm a fanatic. I think it can be used in so many different ways.
Well, I mean, this is kind of a side related, but unrelated to what we're going to talk about, I'm going to have you talk about a lot of. I just think podcasting, there's just so many neat things with podcasting. It really gives the people a voice, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And I'm not trying to get political or anything like that, but with major news, whether you're left or right or in the middle, it's 3 minutes at best, and you really can't get at subjects. And again, that's news, that's politics, that's world crises, things like that. Yeah, it's mainly if it bleeds, it leads. With podcasting, and I tune into lots of different podcasts, man, you can dive in deep and you can give so much detail. And it's such a vehicle for learning. It's just going to be fascinating to see where it goes. And you help people make money directly through it and largely indirectly through it. But I guess share a little bit about yourself. And I don't want you to get into the whole story because I'm going to get you back on. I want to talk about your journey from corporate tech sales into how you got now. And I know there's a lot of networking in there. And that'll be a whole nother episode, kind of a tease for everybody. But just, the types of things you do now with respect to your business.
Oh, yes. No, Frank, thank you so very much on this. And thanks for the opportunity to chat. I know whomever is listening to this is going to be quality individuals. And I think that's one of the key components and the crux of why I love podcasting. I love extolling the virtues of the benefits of podcasting for both personal and professional branding. And it's because it creates community engagement. If anyone knows anything about branding, what you need to do is get a group of people to rally around you and grow that community. So everyone's talking about you, buying from you, and, being fanatics as well and sharing how awesome your product, service, or whatever is, right?
Yeah.
So my background, to be brutally honest on this, I left corporate America. I don't know if you want to say left, choose to leave, was helped along, nudging myself out of it. Long story short was I had my entire identity built into the world of the last 20 years of selling, for lack of a better term, hardware, right? Now, granted, it's the infrastructure of the future in the world that we live in today, but I wrapped myself in the brand of the companies that I worked for. When I left, all I had was Sia Yasatornrat. What the heck is she all about? And I took a year and a half of soul searching. But within that year and a half, I got into genealogy. And within that, I learned very quickly after the grandparent stage, when you get into great grandparents, you become nothing but birth dates and death dates. And what inspired me about this was, golly gee willikers, it's not that long ago these people lived, but we don't know anything about them. And this again fed into back in 2017, 2018 timeframe. And by the way, podcasting has long existed prior to.
Sure.
I've been listening to podcasts forever, but I had that moment of inspiration. I had my Simon Sinek why, which was, why don't we leverage podcasting as a tool to create your voice, your legacy, really your legacy of who you are, what your thoughts are. Are you funny? You're not funny, whatever message that you want to project out to the world. And that was my first gut and why into podcasting. And then as I was really developing our business and my own personal podcasts, I realized, you know what? You can make business concept conversations entertaining. You can actually learn from one another in different ways. Businesses can really adapt podcasting as an additional tool in their little belt for marketing strategy. And if you look back in 2017, 16, 17, 18 timeframe, not a lot of businesses were doing podcasts, not in the context that we're seeing it today.
Right.
And so that's where my past and how it is today. Successful businesses that want to be successful and future leading in the digital age will have some form of digital content. May not be a podcast specifically. Maybe they're not going to be a TikTok, next thing. I don't know. But what I'm saying though is all businesses have to embrace some form of digital media content, whether it is writing a blog post, newsletter, right? That's more traditional, older school way of thinking of how to get, content out there to your community. There's the podcast audio format that we're talking about. All the Spotify, Apple Tunes, Google, et cetera, Audible of the world, where you can listen to while you're driving or you're multitasking or whatever. And then there's a video side of it. And the podcast purists don't count video as a quote podcast. Oftentimes they'll say a video podcast or something to that effect. But either way, the bottom line is it's a video format. So for those that like to look at the people interacting, they're more visual oriented, have the time to watch it, or maybe have it playing in the background and watching it occasionally type thing, that fits it as well. So businesses have a lot of options to say, how can we best market ourselves, get that, corporate engagement that we want in the fastest, easiest, cost-efficient manner. So.
Yeah, as you were talking, a number of thoughts kind of hit me. I was at a meeting this morning, and the realtor stood up and she was sharing about a seminar she was at. And the person her coach that was leading the seminar, said this, and she shared it with the whole group. She said, exposure is better than talent, or something along those lines. And she went on to explain, is like, you can be the most talented person in the world, but if nobody knows about you, then you're done. Right. And so you're better off to have the exposure. And that's what I hear when you're saying, this is, to me, podcasting or getting media out is kind of that path in the middle of the road, the fork in the middle of the road back we had in the mid 90s. Do I get on email or not? What should I do? Right. And there were people who said, I'm not getting on email. I'm not doing that. That's stupid. Call me. And they either eventually got on that path or they probably went out of business, because if you didn't have email, you didn't have a website, and that was the beginning of the end. So I think there's a whole lot to what you're having to say here. My entry into not actually podcasting, but listening to podcasting, which listening to podcasts led me into podcasting. I got sick of listening to talk radio. There's really not a lot on. And it's like news. And, when you have a 30-minute commute to different meetings around town, you just get bombed with sports talk. It gets old. There's nothing there. But with this, wow, there's tons.
Well, I liken the podcast medium to being like the, what's that saying? The open roads of the West. Like, it's a free for all.
Yeah, the wild West.
Yeah. And well, thank you for anyone that wants to understand how to translate Sia speak, it's Frank. You've always been able to get the words out of my mouth. But it is a wild West. But I love to maybe do a soft actor analogy, which is imagine you're a painter and you've got a blank canvas in front of you and you get to pick and choose the colors on your palette. And you decide to start your artwork, but midway through, you have another vision for something. And so you change up your palette and you continue on with that existing, paint, or you start over, right? Does it mean that makes you any less of an artist? No, it just means you've created something and you keep creating beautiful things. And that's how I feel about podcasting. You could literally have your own show, Frank, this show right here, right? Networking RX. You can change it up. You said you sometimes do solo, sometimes you have guests. Maybe you might have some guests that are not in the norm, but because of their story, they're so amazing that you're like, you know what? I can help you with networking. And that's how we're going to tie you into the context of the show. It's something up and change it up. Ultimately, the decision is you. And that's what I emphasize with everybody. Okay. You are the master of your own podcast and whatever content, again, you're putting out there and your personal brand and professional brand, but it's you. You ultimately decide. Talk radio and all that stuff. You're beholden to the station. You're beholden to if they have specific sponsors that have certain agendas, or if the station itself has a certain agenda, as you say, especially in our highly politicized, climate that we're in. Podcasting, it offers that almost like that divergence of, I want to hear talk radio in the context. I love hearing conversation and thoughtful communication, but I just don't want to deal with, the BS of it all. And other aspect of podcasting, it doesn't have to be that interview format. What if you're a creative in the context of like an improv? So one of the folks that I've met through you, and we actually started our own project as a result, Two Deer in the Headlights, JD Gershbein.
Yeah.
He is an improver. And I love the idea of seeing how improv is taking advantage of the podcast medium, right? Or these people that do those serials, about murder and crime, true crime, or just pure theater. Audio theater. It really harkens back to me back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, the heyday of radio, if you will. Podcasting is doing it, but man alive, think about all that great creativity from everyone out there that, like you said, we may not have never known if they didn't have a contract somewhere.
Yeah, no, it's amazing where it's going. And I wish I would have, probably you too would have jumped on it years ago. And I remember people mentioning it to me. I'm like, oh, come on, I'm busy with other things, trying to master Facebook and whatnot. Relationships, when you talk to your clients, what are some of the things you talk to them about as far as, how they can use it to, I mean, for some people it's a vanity thing, right? I'm going to get on and listen to myself talk, but other people it's a way of meeting people or connecting with people on a whole different level.
It is, absolutely. It is not, okay, look, to some degree, let's be really honest to ourselves. It is a bit of a vanity thing, but that doesn't mean it's your driver, right? Maybe it might be your little light, a little match that lights the fire to get you going there, right? But the reality of podcasting, or quite frankly, any kind of content creation that you put out digitally, again, digital content, ultimately is differentiation, okay? Everyone has a competitor of sorts somewhere doing the same thing as you. So what's your value? What solution are you offering them that is going to answer their need and solve their problem for them? And that makes you so special. And quite frankly, can you do the job is a question that I used to have. I used to ask all my hiring managers back in the day is, can the person do the job? And while they're doing that job, do you like that person while doing the job? Right. Same thing with podcasting. So whatever product, service, solution that you sell, you're representing yourself, all the while your audience is going to be sitting back and listening to you saying, do I like this person I'm listening to? So Frank, do I like you while I'm listening to you? Am I getting to know who you are? And are you competent? Can you execute? Do you have the expertise? Do you have the credibility? Do you have the recognition that I'm going to be comfortable with putting my dollars towards you? And I'm going to tell you this right now, majority of people in every single industry you can think of is not leveraging this enough for themselves. So get ahead of your competition. And I can't tell you how many businesses, corporations still don't fully understand how to leverage that in a way that is going to be useful and create that community, that, elusive community that we're all talking about. I mean, Frank, you have built an amazing community, and that's why I'm gravitated to be in your group and, be the biggest cheerleader for, quite frankly, the community is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you're saying. To be honest, lights are going off or bells are going off in my head, light bulbs. We talk when I asked you the question about relationships, I was thinking you might go to the notion of people that they interview, because that's, for me, that's what's, I have built, people we know, Casey and JD, and built relationships with you. And certainly with Casey, it started with podcasting. JD, it started with podcasting, getting him on and getting a chance to know him. But what you're talking about is building a relationship with an audience, and that I'd never really thought about that I'm actually talking to somebody out there. And people actually do come up to me, and I might say something cute on something, and they'll mimic it back to me, basically saying, "Hey, I listened to your podcast," which is really kind of a neat thing.
That's interesting that you mentioned that. So that is so funny, because I do love the guests. Yeah, one of the bigger reasons of podcasting is it's almost like you're getting a master class every single conversation you have, and it's for free, right? And we're exchanging information and ideas, and growing perspectives, with one another. So right. Yes, from a guest and host relationship for podcasting and the benefits, it is a very interpersonal benefit, right? You're building a relationship with someone that can validate and strengthen your network bonds that you've developed in relationship together. Absolutely, 100%. I guess from my perspective with podcasting, again, because we're a podcast production agency and consulting firm. So when we guide our clients in understanding how to create content that's interesting and engaging, you have to think outside yourself. I'm sorry that vanity thing seeps back in, but really ultimately the vanity of your audience. What is going to make them want to listen to you? Because look, you could be saying the most amazing things and putting it out there, but if it sounds like, and I actually said this today on, do you know Orly? So I had Orly on my live stream this morning, and I likened the analogy to this. Imagine you're at a cocktail party and you stand around the tabletop, the high tops, and you join a conversation. Inevitably, oftentimes, there's usually one individual that sits there and just goes like this, talks. Hey, here's what I do. Here's what I do. Oh, by the way, what do you do again? Oh, wait, it's going to have any benefit to me? No. Okay. Well, I'll just keep talking and finding someone. And it becomes very apparent. It's about them. Right. And that is the equivalent of what I'm saying with podcast production or branding, for that matter, is you could be talking about yourself all day, laying your brand, how awesome your brand is. But ultimately, what are you going to be doing? Shouting out into the canyons, right?
Yeah.
Who may or may not be hearing. So I would challenge everyone to think about this: is you and your conversations with your guests, absolutely, it's imperative. You got to have the good chemistry. You got to have a great conversation, something of value. But it's always about the audience in the end. What are they going to get out of it? Are they feeling like you're going to be that person at that cocktail party just doing all the talking? Or is it where you talk and then you maybe ask a thought-provoking question, so that then everyone around that cocktail table is going to want to reply back and engage?
Do you get people who are stuck in the narcissism of just talking? And I guess I'm sure you do. How do you get them out of that? That's the hardest.
Oh man, alive. You know what? That just reminds me, I think both of us should get like psychologists on our shows more often. It is hard at times because that's not my job. I'm there to create. And if, they need guidance or advisement, I always offer it. But ultimately your show is your show, as I mentioned before, right? I have coached people before on saying, hey, consider asking certain questions this way. Make it more open-ended, right? I hate to say it. Some personalities are going to engage and listen and want to learn and better, improve. And others are just like, this is my show, step off, stay in your lane. So you got to be careful on that. There's no easy answer, Frank.
Yeah. Well, the numbers don't lie, right? I mean, you start looking at downloads, and I don't hover on downloads and worry about it too much. But somebody who it's all about them, I mean, you can listen once or twice and it's all about them, and then you just don't tune in anymore. And that's just going to show up in their numbers, and eventually they're just going to fade away.
Well, I know numbers are such a sticky thing. And I know we can go on this on forever about numbers. I will caution everybody on podcasting. Okay. Depends. There's a time and place when numbers count. Okay. Number of followers, number of downloads. And even then, how are you counting down those numbers? So is it first 30 days, 90 days, forever ago downloads, the followers? Are they actually engaging, or are they just sitting click to follow to say you've got some followers? How active are they in, ensuring whatever message, product, service, sales, whatever that is that you're representing, are they actually going to do anything actionable in support of you? I've seen so many quote influencers, especially those on LinkedIn, saying I'm an influencer on LinkedIn with tons of views or tons of followers. But if you actually look at their substance and you look at their engagement, it's really not there. So I caution everyone on numbers. I've had clients where they literally zero published podcasts. They hadn't even launched yet, but they ended up getting a huge Fortune 500 company to sponsor them because they sold the story. It's almost as if you're an entrepreneur asking for seed funding and asking for VC and all that. Similar mentality. If someone believes in your story, your ability to deliver upon that story, you're going to get people that will look to invest in you and build in you and trust in you. And there's a stat, they say it from the Edison Research on podcasting, which I highly recommend everyone check it out every year. Edison Research states that over their surveys, podcast listeners are affluent, educated, and are willing to purchase or follow through on whatever podcast they're listening to. So if they believe in them, they'll buy into their product, services, et cetera.
I believe the research. People who listen to podcasts either have a decent phone or a car, right? One or two or both. So it's not, again, it's not 30s. Well, I guess 30s, 40s radio was, not everyone had radios. Let's shift gears here a little bit, Sia. Let's talk about your business, the types of things you do, help your clients with, and how people can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. So think of it this way. If I can summarize very quickly, consider me your easy button for all things podcasting. You can come to me, ask me questions about the world of podcasting, what it is. If it's something that you're considering, I'm always happy to help out. I'm a firm believer in the saying that all ships rise with the tide, and I will support you in any best way I can. I may or may not be the perfect fit for you. So if not, there's a lot of other folks that do something similar to what I do. I mean, goodness gracious, everyone's a podcast, right?
Right.
But my company, Innovation Media Enterprises, I call it boutique, but it is boutique for a very specific reason, which is I'm looking for mutual benefit and commonality. If I will not just produce anybody's podcast, I've got to really believe that this individual is really committed. And that is something that I think you and I spoke about earlier, is those folks that are looking for vanity projects, I challenge very hard to ensure that they're committed to it. My big suggestion is, if you're going to launch a podcast, make sure you're going to have a finite timeline of when you want to do it. If you can't commit indefinitely, like a weekly or a bi-weekly, then call it a season. Tell everyone I'm doing 12 episodes and I'm going to recharge, regroup, and do a season 2 later. That way you're actually communicating to your audience of your commitment to that podcast. And then you have the flexibility to change it up or continue on with another one, but it doesn't look like pod fade. And that's one thing you do not want to do as a personal brand or professional brand, corporate brand. You don't want to look like you start a project in Q1 and then funding changed and then you let it go and it dies on the vine Q2, Q3, and then you try to do it again Q4. That's the worst thing you could do for branding. And I think that's branding 101. Whatever thing you're going to commit to, if you know you can't do it for more than a quarter, then call it the Q1 show or season 1 and leave and be vague about it, right? That is the big thing. Now, if you others that want to talk to me more specifically on production, how to produce it, editing, all that stuff, post-production, how to launch, how to social media, all that stuff, just go to innovationmediaenterprises.com. You can always find me on LinkedIn, Sia Yasso Tornrat. Find me on Twitter at IamSYasso. I'm on Instagram, not that much, but I am S Yasso on Instagram. But I'm 100% pretty much on LinkedIn. You'll always find me posting. And I live stream Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
And it's Sia, Cyya. I type that in and you pretty much come up. So
well, it's Syya.
I'm sorry, Syya. Yeah.
And there's
sorry.
no one else. Yeah, there's no one else out there. I think,
right. Thank you. Syya. Well, this has been great. I'll get your I will get your URL into the show notes. So I appreciate your time today. This has been great, and we will get you back on, talk about the story of Sia. So, thank you.
Frank, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.